I never thought a simple text message could destroy my world in an instant, but that's exactly what happened that night when I saw the message that changed everything. I sat in my car late at night, gripping my phone so tightly that my knuckles had turned white. The air around me felt suffocating, like the walls of the small garage were closing in. My thumb hovered over the screen, rereading the words that had sent my mind spiraling. "You should know what your wife is up to when you're not around." Attached to it was a single photo. It wasn't grainy or unclear. There was no room for misinterpretation. It was crystal clear, like a dagger aimed directly at my chest. There she was, my wife, sitting in a dimly lit restaurant booth with her cousin Jake. Her hand was resting on his thigh casually, intimately, the way it used to rest on mine when we were newlyweds. She was leaning into him, her head slightly tilted, and the way she was looking at him. It was a look I hadn't seen from her in months. It wasn't just a smile. It was warmth, desire, and comfort all wrapped in one gaze, and it wasn't meant for me. I felt like the floor beneath me had disappeared, leaving me suspended in midair, unable to catch my breath. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe the picture had been taken out of context. Maybe she had a good reason for being there with him. But as the seconds ticked by, the excuses I tried to feed myself crumbled under the weight of the reality staring back at me. My mind raced, jumping from one thought to another. How long had this been going on? Why Jake, of all people? And who had sent the message? Was it a concerned friend, or someone who wanted to watch my life fall apart from the sidelines? The heat in my chest spread rapidly until it reached my head, making it throb. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, ran my hands through my hair, and took several deep breaths. But it didn't help. My pulse wouldn't slow down. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the dimly lit street. Outside the car window as fragments of the last few months played on a loop in my head. Her sudden disinterest in our usual Friday night movie marathons. The late nights where she'd come home exhausted from girls' nights out. The way she had started sleeping on the far side of the bed, with her back turned to me. Each memory was like a puzzle piece, and they were all clicking into place. The picture they formed made my stomach churn, but there was still a part of me that clung to hope. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe it was all in my head. That's what she'd say, right? She'd tell me I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. I could already hear her voice in my head, sweet but sharp, turning the blame back. On me? I needed proof. Real proof. Something she couldn't deny or twist. When I finally dragged myself inside the house, the lights were off, and the familiar hum of the fridge was the only sound filling the silence. She was already asleep. As I crept into the bedroom, the soft glow of her phone screen caught my eye. It was lying on the nightstand, just within reach. I knew it was wrong, but the temptation was too strong. I reached for it, holding my breath as I pressed the home button. The screen lit up, and my heart pounded like a drum. But when I swiped up, I was met with disappointment. She had changed. Her password. The digits I knew by heart didn't work anymore. I put the phone back and sat on the edge of the bed, my mind spinning out of control. Why would she change her password if she had nothing to hide? My hands shook as I clutched my own phone, scrolling through old photos and messages, desperately searching for something, anything, that would explain what I had just seen. But no matter how hard I tried to convince myself that this could all be a misunderstanding, the truth was closing in on me like a tidal wave. My gut told me what my brain refused to accept. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling while every suspicious moment over the past few months replayed in my head. I thought of the times she had brushed off my attempts to spend time together, the nights when she claimed to be too tired for intimacy, and the moments when I had caught her smiling at her phone, only for her to quickly put it away when I walked into the room. The puzzle was complete, and I hated the picture it painted. By the time dawn broke, I had made up my mind. I couldn't live like this, drowning in doubt and uncertainty. I needed answers, and I needed them now. As I watched the first rays of sunlight filter through the curtains, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to wait for the truth to come to me. I was going to confront it head on, even if it shattered me in the process. I had to know, because the man who had sent that message was right. I deserved to know what my wife was really up to when I wasn't around. I didn't need any more clues. I was going to get the truth, even if it broke me completely. The morning light crept into the kitchen, casting a warm glow on the countertops and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. It would have been a perfect morning if my mind weren't a battlefield. She stood by the stove, humming softly as she scrambled eggs, the picture of calm and normalcy. Her hair was tied back, and she wore that old, oversized sweatshirt I had always found cute. She turned, catching me watching her, and smiled as if nothing had happened. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "I was thinking maybe we could head to the farmer's market today. Pick up some fresh veggies, maybe grab brunch after?" I stared at her, unable to form a response. My mind was too busy screaming. The image of her with Jake burned in my head, and no amount of coffee or eggs could wash it away. I could feel my hand tightening around the mug in front of me, my knuckles turning white. "Mark, you okay?" Her voice was soft, concerned, but it felt like a dagger twisting in my chest. I forced myself to nod, even though my throat felt like it was closing. "I'm fine," I mumbled, taking a sip of coffee I didn't even taste. She placed a plate of eggs and toast in front of me, then sat across the table, scrolling through her phone like this was any other morning. But it wasn't. It was the morning everything was about to explode. I waited, watching her carefully. She talked about mundane things, the weather, weekend plans, a new show she wanted us to watch together. I let her go on until the silence between us became suffocating. Then I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table. Her fingers froze mid-scroll, and for a moment she didn't move. But when she finally looked up, her expression shifted ever so slightly. The warmth drained from her face as she stared at the screen. "Care to explain this?" My voice was steady, but I could feel the tension beneath it, like a storm about to break. She blinked, then quickly recovered, leaning back in her chair with a sigh. "Mark, seriously? This?" She waved her hand dismissively at the photo, but her voice had an edge to it now. "It's not what you think. We had dinner, that's all. You're blowing this way out of proportion." I didn't say anything. I just watched her, waiting for the truth to slip through the cracks. Her eyes narrowed when she realized I wasn't taking the bait. "You're being paranoid," she added, her voice sharper. "It was just Jake. He's family. Do you really think I'd do something with my cousin? God, Mark, you're acting insane." There it was. The gaslighting. The attempt to turn the tables and make me doubt myself. It hit me like a slap, but I didn't flinch. "I'm not insane," I said quietly. "I've known something was off for months. You've been distant. You've been hiding things." "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "You're creating a problem where there isn't one." My jaw tightened and I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Then let me see your phone." Her reaction was immediate. She clutched the phone to her chest, her knuckles whitening. "No," she said, her voice rising. "This is why our marriage is falling apart. You don't trust me." "Gee, I wonder why," I shot back, my voice finally breaking through the calm. "You change your password. You spend late nights out. You won't let me see your phone. What do you expect me to think?" Her lips trembled, but instead of crying, she glared at me. "I expect you to trust your wife, but apparently that's too much to ask." She stood up, grabbing her coffee and storming toward the sink. "I'm not doing this! I'm not going to sit here while you accuse me of something I didn't do!" I didn't follow her. I just sat there, staring at the empty plate in front of me, the anger boiling under my skin. She was deflecting, dodging the truth like a pro, and for a moment I hated how good she was at it. The next few days passed like a blur of tension. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was cold and clipped. Then, on Thursday night, she dropped the bomb. "Lisa's having a party this weekend." she said casually, folding laundry on the couch. We're invited. I didn't respond at first, but when she added, Jake will be there, I finally looked up. Jake? My voice was flat. Yeah, she said, avoiding my gaze. He's a close friend of Lisa's. It felt like a setup, like she wanted me to see them together again just to push me further into madness. But instead of confronting her, I nodded. We'll go, I said. If she thought I was just going to sit back and watch her parade around with him. She had another thing coming. The party was already in full swing when we arrived. The house buzzed with laughter and conversations, the smell of alcohol thick in the air. My chest tightened as I scanned the room, searching for him. I didn't have to search long. Jake was at the bar, leaning against the counter with a drink in his hand. He looked up, saw me, and smirked. The smugness on his face made my blood boil, but I kept my expression neutral. My wife wasted no time making her rounds, hugging friends, laughing and smiling as if we hadn't been at each other's throats all week. It didn't take long for her to find Jake. I watched from across the room as she laughed at something he said, playfully touching his arm. It was deliberate. She wanted me to see. I could feel the eyes of other guests on me, their sympathetic glances and awkward smiles. They knew. Maybe they had known for a while. My humiliation was on full display, and no one had the guts to say a word. My fists clenched, and my breath came in short bursts. I wasn't going to let this go on any longer. With my heart pounding like a war drum, I made my way through the crowd. Each step felt heavier than the last, but I didn't stop until I was standing right in front of them. Jake turned, his smirk still in place. My wife's laughter died in her throat when she saw the look on my face. You think this is funny? I said, my voice louder than I intended. People nearby stopped talking, their heads turning toward us. Mark, she whispered, her eyes wide. What are you doing? I'm done playing this game, I snapped. I know what's going on. I know you've been lying to me, and you... I turned to Jake. You've got some nerve showing your face here. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but I didn't care. My gaze was locked on them, daring either one to deny it. Jake took a step back, but my wife grabbed his arm. Stop it, she hissed. You're making a scene. Good, I said, taking another step forward. It's about time everyone knew the truth. In that moment, I realized there was no going back. This wasn't a fight I could walk away from quietly. If I was going to lose, I'd make sure it was loud, messy, and unforgettable. If I was going to lose this battle, I'd do it with an explosion big enough to leave a mark on everyone watching. It's not what you think, Jake said, his voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. He wore that same smug expression, as if he thought he could talk his way out of this mess and make me look like the paranoid husband. But I wasn't about to let that happen. Not tonight. I felt my blood boil as I stared at him, the man who had helped destroy my marriage. My fists clenched so tightly that my knuckles cracked, but I wasn't thinking about consequences anymore. His words hung in the air, but I wasn't buying them. You've got some nerve, I said, taking a step closer. Standing here. Lying to my face like I don't see exactly what's going on. Mark, stop, my wife hissed, grabbing my arm. This isn't the place. I yanked my arm free. It became the place the moment you brought him into our lives. Jake raised his hands defensively, trying to defuse the situation. Look, man, I get it. You're upset, but we don't have to do this here. I almost laughed. You didn't have a problem doing this in front of me. Why should I care where it happens? And that's when he said it. You're overreacting, Jake said, shaking his head. This is all a misunderstanding. You're making yourself look stupid. I don't remember deciding to throw the punch. My body moved on instinct, fueled by months of suspicion, betrayal, and humiliation. My fist connected with his jaw, and the sound echoed through the room like a firecracker. Jake stumbled back, knocking into a table, sending drinks crashing to the floor. Gasps filled the room, and for a moment, everything felt like it was moving, in slow motion. Then someone screamed, and the chaos erupted. Jake tried to steady himself, but I didn't give him the chance. I lunged forward, shoving him into the wall. He threw a wild punch, grazing my shoulder, but it wasn't enough to stop me. I grabbed his shirt and drove my knee into his gut, watching as the air left his lungs. "Mark, stop it!" My wife's voice cut through the noise, but I ignored her. This was between me and him. Jake tried to fight back, landing a weak punch against my ribs, but I barely felt it. I slammed him against the wall again, my fist crashing into his face once more. Blood spattered onto his shirt, and he groaned, collapsing to the floor. "Enough!" she screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. Tears streamed down her face as she pressed a napkin against his bleeding nose. "You've lost your mind. You've ruined everything." I stood over them, breathing heavily, my fists aching from the impact. I watched as she cradled him like he was the victim, like he hadn't been the one sneaking around behind my back. "You think I ruined everything?" I said, my voice raw. "No, you did that the moment you let him into our marriage." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't feel sympathy. Not anymore. By the time the police arrived, the damage had already been done. The guests had scattered, leaving behind only whispers and discarded drinks. But someone had recorded everything, the punches, the accusations, the tears, and within hours, the video was all over social media. I sat in my car, scrolling through the comments as my phone buzzed nonstop. He had every right to do what he did. The wife and that guy deserved it. What kind of person betrays their spouse like that? Mark is a legend. I would have done the same. Despite everything, I felt a twisted sense of relief. For once, the world wasn't laughing at me. They were on my side. But that didn't change the fact that my marriage was over. By the time I got home, she was already there, pacing the living room with red, swollen eyes. As soon as I stepped inside, she rushed toward me, her hands clasped together like she was praying. "Mark, please," she sobbed. "We can fix this. I know I messed up, but it doesn't have to end like this. I love you. I love us." I stared at her, feeling nothing but emptiness. "You didn't love me when you were with him?" "That's not true," she insisted. "It was a mistake. I wasn't thinking straight. Please, just give me a chance to make it right." I shook my head. "It's too late for that." The next morning, I met with a lawyer. The papers were filed before lunch. When she came home that evening and saw me packing my suitcase, she broke down again, sobbing uncontrollably. "You don't have to do this," she cried. "We can go to counseling. We can fix this." I zipped up my suitcase and turned to face her one last time. "We can't fix what you destroyed." The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork, moving boxes, and late-night phone calls from her that I refused to answer. She sent texts, emails, even letters, begging me to reconsider. But I didn't. The video of the fight had gone viral, and while some of the attention died down after a few days, the damage to her reputation was permanent. Her family distanced themselves, her friends avoided her, and Jake was nowhere to be found. From what I heard, he stopped seeing her shortly after the video spread. I guess the thrill wasn't worth the fallout. One evening, as I sat in my new apartment, my phone buzzed with yet another message from her. "Please, Mark, let's talk. I know you're angry, but we can work through this." I stared at the screen. For a long time before placing the phone face down on the table, there was nothing left to say. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, the cool night air wrapping around me as I walked toward my car. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. As I sat behind the wheel, I didn't feel regret or sadness, just relief. I wasn't the man who begged for forgiveness anymore. Respect isn't something you ask for, it's something you demand. And when you don't get it, you leave.